Welcome to Season 9 of the Let's Talk Data podcast series presented by SAP, where we break down how businesses can go from data overload to data confidence, unlocking AI, smarter decision-making, and real business transformation. If you haven't done so already, please follow or subscribe to the podcast on your favorite channel to stay tuned in.
So hello everyone and welcome to this episode of the SAP Let's Talk Data podcast. My name is Wong from SAP Product Marketing, and today I'm excited to be sitting down with the team at Bloor Research to deep dive into SAP HANA Cloud and its role as an in-memory cloud database for developers. Robin and Daniel, welcome to the podcast. I know we have a lot to discuss, but maybe before we begin, let's take a minute to do some proper introductions. So can you guys give our listeners a bit of background into Bloor Research and maybe what you guys both do there?
Bloor Research is a technology analyst company, and it's been in existence since about 1989. And we look at pretty much every area of technology, but we, let's say, cut our teeth in the area of database. So this subject today is, let's say, front and center to the way that Bloor Research works. I'm the guy that founded it, in actual fact, but I take a backseat role for most things, but I get involved in technology that I think is interesting. And of course, SAP HANA has been one of my focuses for quite a while. Daniel?
Sure, thanks Robin, thanks Lauren. So as Lauren mentioned, I'm Daniel Howard. I'm a senior analyst at Bloor. I've been there for probably about a decade now, and I've been focusing on areas of data for almost very nearly that long. I have a couple of other interests, but for the most part, I stick to the data spaces, covering various things, including, but not limited to, data analytics, data governance, data discovery, data catalogs, all that sort of thing. In addition to, of course, databases themselves. We cover a bunch of things, not least of all data.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thanks for the brief rundown on what you guys do at Bloor Research. I'm really excited to kind of get into this topic today of SAP HANA Cloud, knowing your guys' background and extensive, research history within the database field. So I guess let's just get right into it. So your team at Bloor recently conducted a research study on SAP HANA Cloud, essentially to evaluate its efficacy and value as an in-memory database. I guess before we actually get into the results that you guys found, can you maybe speak to the scope of this study and, any of the questions that you were looking to answer that helped guide your research?
I mean, the first thing when you're looking at technology, we wanted, of course, to talk to users. And so most of the activity in the study was actually speaking for, I think about an hour or so to people that were, let's say, at the coalface as regards. And we had three very different companies that we talked to. And the thing that's, let's say, difficult when you're looking at a product like SAP HANA, it's really very capable. I mean, even if you look at, let's say, well-established databases, the capability of SAP HANA, it kind of immense. It's not just a straight relational database. It does vector, it does graph, it does pretty much anything that you can think of in terms of data formats. So in talking to three separate users, we could only, if you like, get three separate perspectives where if you really wanted to see the whole of the capability of SAP HANA, you probably have to talk to about 9 different users, which we didn't. There's only so much time you can spend on this.
Right, but that's great that we really get to uncover those real world insights. You did mention that you interviewed 3. Do you remember, or can you give us a little bit of background into maybe the industries that they represented, or maybe the size of their company?
So, 3 customers we talked to, covering 3 quite different areas. One of them was in manufacturing, specifically automotive manufacturing. One was in financial services, and one was in energy development, clean energy development. Although I don't really dug into exactly how big each company was, there was certainly a range of sizes. Most of them were North America centric, although I think several of them also spread across to Europe and New Zealand as well. Anything I've forgotten, Robin?
No, not really. I mean, the usage that they were making of each of these things was of each of these aspects of HANA was quite different, but it was all at the current status in the cloud. So some of them started on premise, and that would, if you like, it's a decision which is probably completely cost based to go from on premise to in the cloud, because none of them particularly were concerned about that particular shift.
Yeah, you kind of mentioned, that as we deeper dive into this discussion, and you did just mention, a lot of them started on premises. Maybe for one of these customers, is there a story that you can share? Where did they start? What were their pain points, and maybe some of the key factors that attracted them to SAP HANA Cloud?
Well, I mean, two of the customers we talked to were doing analytics, and that's really not unusual. The point about SAP HANA in terms of analytics is it's very, very fast. Analytics, you really, that often becomes the key criterion for the workload, because really what you're doing is the analytics creates data that is going to be used by the organization. So the faster the analytics is performed, the more up to date the picture that's created actually is. So that for two of the customers, that was just a driving force. And the rest of it, you could say, was background, in the sense that, yes, there were various aspects of SAP HANA that they talked about in one way or another. But, the focus was on getting the latency down between receiving the data and being able to create business intelligence from it.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
the one which really impressed me was the financial services vendor who were using, I mean, they're all impressive in their own way, but that one stood out to me because they were using, they have this really quite difficult, task of, managing incoming payments and so on, and processing them correctly in a way that more or less couldn't be done automatically. They had to sort of investigate, to an extent manually. So they were using SAP for SAP HANA specifically for forecasting how difficult any given period was going to be, and assigning a task force appropriate to it. Which obviously means that they don't risk having being understaffed and letting things slip through and not getting stuff done in time, which would be a massive problem for them for regulatory reasons.
Right.
They don't also have to have a massive standing team where half of them are not, sitting on their hands not doing anything when during less than busy periods. So I thought that was a really good use case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess the real business benefit there is, at the end of the day, being able to make those better decisions. If, a lot of them, their use case is with the analytics, that's because, they need a lot more of that information. And I guess when you guys were going through your conversations, was it mentioned at all that they were looking at multiple different databases? Were they, kind of already an SAP customer, and the next step in that was SAP HANA Cloud, or what was kind of that process?
I mean, that differed from customer to customer. One of the customers was what I would call, and it's almost like cautious, if you like, but they weren't engaged in a large number of projects, so to speak. Other customers, like one of the customers, was starting to use the vector capability of SAP HANA with AI, and most organizations that we've come in contact have been actually, if you like, very cautious about AI. Of course, they've messed about with it because it's the big deal in terms of, let's say it gets a massive amount of publicity, even in the normal media. The issue that's created is an issue that SAP HANA manages to address reasonably well. The issue that you face in the modern IT environment is that you have many data sources, many more. It grows year after year. And when AI appeared, of course, that was yet another necessity to set up data streams to gather data and to be able to use it. So having a technology that's multi-model, which is fundamentally the nature of SAP HANA, and it's the same in the cloud and on-premise, it is just a nice insurance policy for the organization, they aren't going to be able to use every single dimension of it. Probably no company is going to be able to do that because of the broad spectrum of what it can do. But if the next project that comes up has a specific data aspect to it, then SAP HANA is very, very good technology to be working with.
Yeah, I mean, I think customers who talked to, all of them said they, obviously they're all going to keep using SAP in the future. I think several of them were talking about new projects they wanted to roll out and new things they wanted to do with it. So in that respect, one of the big advantages, I think, is, it'll be a future-proofing, as much as that can exist. When if a new change project needs to roll out in a year, when eventually AI starts becoming, a bit more old hat, and people start looking for the next big trend in data, having that broad range of capabilities means they're much more likely to be, ready for it.
Yeah, and that's kind of a great segue. I think AI is a huge trend that's only going to get bigger. So I really like the fact that you guys pointed out the multi-model aspect. That really is a part of SAP HANA Cloud that, further enhances the support for AI and machine learning capabilities. But I guess were there other features that, stood out from these customers or in your interviews? And I believe, Robin, you also have a developer background. Like, I would love to hear kind of any personal anecdotes or perspectives that you have on some of the features that were brought up in these conversations.
One of the things that I used to do when I was a developer, and it's a while ago, I have to say, but I was on the database side of the world, which is why when I became a technology analyst, database was the first thing that I looked at. But one of the aspects I learned as a developer, as a project manager, project leader, was that when you're using new technology, you really need to do two projects. You need one, which is, let's say it's a prototype project, but it's a project that doesn't matter too much, where you learn about the nature of the technology. And then once you've learned about the nature of the technology, you can go large, let's say, with it and apply it to a much broader project. Well, what was the case with with two of these companies was that data analytics was where they were. And that means, that was the trend before AI, if you like. But it was a trend, I think personally, it was a trend that actually justified itself in terms of the results it produced, more so than AI has, because, AI, it may, let's say, be very attractive in terms of what you might imagine it can do because of its strange neural network nature. But with machine learning, you knew exactly what was going on, and you were getting, let's say, the best kind of statistical capability that the industry ever had. And so you could do that. And again, I think with one of the companies, there was definitely a prototype before you actually do it in terms of the projects they're applying it to. But there's this other thing, which is the support issue. One of the things that I noticed as a developer, when I used to be, let's say, at the coalface doing that things, was it really helped if you could talk to people that knew the technology. Well, we did get a very positive report on SAP support in respect of the customers we talked to. But one of them did the kind of thing that I would have done in my day, which was he knew someone in SAP and he was taking his support via a back channel, which I think is actually very clever. Something like SAP HANA is, if you like, count the various features that you could know about. They're just a multitude. It's just a large, nobody's going to know. Even the resident experts at SAP are not going to know all of it. So what happens in those people when they use technology that's so multidimensional is they just focus in on the things that they need to use. And if they've got any sense, and this was the case, I think, with all three customers, is that you take support. You actually use your support because, I mean, this is the biggest problem that you actually get with IT projects is you can go a long way and then suddenly discover you got it wrong. And that's the the thing that these three customers definitely had been, you could say, cautious, but very sensible in the way they used the technology. And they did make a point of emphasizing taking support when they needed it.
Right. Anything else on that end, Daniel, that you wanted to highlight? Any areas of interest? I know you mentioned the forecasting use case previously, but any other features that stood out to you, maybe?
Yeah, there were a couple I thought were worth pointing out. One was almost, well, it wasn't just what they were doing with SAP, it's what they weren't doing with it. Specifically, they weren't needing to do much performance monitoring at all, because a lot, one of them commented they were so, SAP was so dependable for sort of ensuring their performance, good performance, as long as they did, sort of vaguely sensible things with database design and things like that, that they didn't really need to worry about it. They might do an occasional performance review or something like that. Maybe they have like a notification system, but nothing like beyond that. No extensive monitoring suite or anything like that, because they just knew that SAP would be able to handle it. And that's obviously, a big cost saving because you don't have to run all these different tools. It just frees up a lot of brain power from people, right? Because you don't have to employ people to look that for you. The people who would be doing that can be doing something else. It just makes things easier for everybody, right? If you just one less thing on the table. So I thought that was really worth mentioning, because it's kind of, it's a thing which isn't there rather than me that. And the other thing is, I completely agree with what you were saying about AI. I think all the customers who were on some level excited about generative AI and wanting to do stuff with something. I think several of them mentioned using HANA's vector support. Usually and think RAG architectures, which I know HANA supports, was fairly typical. One was already going there. I think the other two were sort of a bit more, as Robin says, I think sensibly quite cautious, but were clearly sort of pointed in that direction at least. So I think there's a lot to be excited about that on that perspective.
I mean, one of the customers was actually processing hundreds of billions of rows from tables.
Yeah, just like truly boggling amounts of data being passed around quite, at speed, without really needing to do much of it.
Performance is, at the end of the day, always an issue, because if you actually ask the users if they want stuff faster, they always say yes. I mean, it's the truth, but there are business constraints in terms of when you absolutely have to get things to work at a particular speed. Just the actual knowledge, the database engine that you're using is phenomenally fast. It's just, it makes an awful lot of IT decisions an awful lot easier for certain kinds of projects, and particularly these kinds of projects that we were talking about, where it needs to be fast and the data is massive.
Yeah, it removes a potential bottleneck, doesn't it? Which is something we're always going to have to think about with any sort of project, is what's going to stop it. And if you don't really need to worry about performance all that much, that's suddenly one less thing to worry about.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very obvious based on this conversation how much improved performance is a key benefit for a lot of these businesses. And like you even mentioned, Daniel, about, taking things off of your load so that you can have more time to focus on other things, and innovate. So I guess we could also say like the improved productivity on that end is also a huge business benefit.
It's freeing up people and resources to be doing other things rather than doing things like performance monitoring and so on. I was really impressed and frankly kind of shocked by the size of team people, customers we were talking to had to manage SAP HANA, because, as we've all been saying, it's a massive solution, and they were dealing with teams of, at most a half a dozen people as their core team managing it.
Yeah.
Some were down. I think one of the companies went down to like maybe 3 or 4. And they all kind of said, if we have a big project, we'll contract more people or push more people onto the team temporarily. But in terms of day-to-day management, this was a really small teams. And obviously that massively reduces your overheads, right? Because you don't need 20 or 30 people working just to maintain your database.
Now, there's another aspect that's probably worth mentioning, which is just an aspect of the nature of the technology. Because it's very scalable and it's in memory, SAP HANA makes the project a different, take a different shape, because an awful lot of the orchestration of data and data streams and in one way or another, just straight ETL, export, transport and load, doesn't take place. So we didn't talk about it because they didn't have that issue. They didn't have the problem of managing data streams.
Yeah. The only time we talked about it was when we were talking about ingesting data into SAP in the first place, which was obviously fine.
Did you have anything else to add on that topic, Robin?
When you're actually in the hot seat, let's say, and you've got various things that you absolutely have to do. The thing that I always used to do in terms of, and it was because I'd been on projects that had failed because of performance. I mean, it's very simple. And the thing that I always used to do at the very start of the project was to do a performance map of what was going down. And the thing that struck me when we were having the conversations that we actually had with these developers was that their performance, that the amount of work they had to do for that was just very small. And it was really what I would think of in a general way as data orchestration was just relatively simple, because the technology made a lot of the things that you might have had to do just irrelevant. You didn't have to do them.
Well, on that note, it does sound like, the research and the interviews that you guys conducted definitely uncovered a lot in HANA Cloud, making a difference for these developers and these customers. Are there any maybe statistics or numbers that stood out in your conversations?
I mean, I think what Robin was saying before about, the tables consisting of, one customer quite happily handling tables of hundreds of millions of records was, the number which stood out to me. It's just a truly massive number, but being able to do that without any serious issues of performance is huge.
Yeah.
And on the flip side, I've already mentioned it, but having a small core team of only 4 to 5 people is just fantastic in terms of productivity and total cost of ownership.
Yeah, and the amount of time and hours of manual work that are probably being saved as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
My experience is large teams are normally responsible for large failures. And it's because coordinating people in the team just becomes more and more difficult every time you add people to the team. And it was the case, and I think in one instance there was only 3 people on the team. And it was quite surprising that it could all be done with small teams, and that's a positive benefit.
Right. Well, we are heading into our wrap up now. So, some of our listeners, which might be a mix of SAP customers, potential SAP customers, developers, other roles, they might be wondering if SAP HANA Cloud is the right solution for them. So, based on your work and your research with this study, what advice would you give to those who are currently in the market for a cloud database solution or solutions?
I would say this in terms of whatever it is that you're doing. Right, you nearly always, if you're doing something that the company has done before and has done well before, then you don't need to particularly worry about it. So you're talking about the situation where people are actually making technology decisions. The technology decision will be shaped by what is available in the market, but it's also going to be shaped on what it is that you absolutely have to do. Right, what is it that this particular project has got to achieve in business terms, in terms of the constraints of the organization, and so on and so forth. And the way that you will normally proceed with this is just to work out, first of all, whether this technology is going to do it. And with SAP, you are in the situation where if SAP can't do it, and I'm not really sure what technology you're going to look at, there is other in-memory technology, so you can certainly take a look at that kind of stuff. But there isn't anything that has got the span of SAP. And then the question is, does the price performance make sense in terms of the project that you're doing? And that's a consideration with every single project you get involved in that's completely new. Where you don't necessarily know exactly what the costings are going to be. We have done in the past many different technology evaluation consultancy engagements. And when we do that, really, it often comes down to considering individual capabilities technically that you absolutely need to achieve for the project that you're attempting, or if it's a strategic adoption, then for the general nature of the kind of workloads that you do in an organization. So it's particularly, if you like, contextual as to what you look at. The thing that I would say is that SAP HANA possibly should be on the list of what you're looking at, depending on what you're doing, simply because it does have a kind of unique capability, and it will help you just to look at the technology and the capabilities of that kind of technology in your evaluation of products to use. There are a lot of fast databases out there, for instance, but there are not a lot of fast, scalable in-memory databases out there. So it should be on the list, is what I would say.
What I'd like to add for that, apart from, I completely agree with what you've been saying, Robert. One of the most important things is going to be, as you said, figuring out if it technically does what you need it to. But one of the things which, again, came out of all these interviews with these customers, which I felt was worth noting, was they all were quite impressed with the rate of new features kind of coming into SAP and being developed and worked on and so on. So I would say that if you're going to be looking at this stuff, you need to be looking at, not just what's in the product right now, but what's going to be a product 6 months down the line. It's entirely possible that, you want this feature for this project, this is what we're going to be doing. But by the time, and maybe SAP doesn't have that feature right now that you definitely need, but by the time you actually get around to doing that project, maybe it will be in SAP. So that's just, I think, something that people should be looking at as well.
For sure. Those are all great key points to consider. Well, Robin and Daniel, thank you so much for joining us for this episode and really pulling back the curtain and giving us behind the scenes look at how developers and customers are using SAP HANA Cloud to meet their business needs. For those listening in, I hope you've enjoyed this episode and learned more about SAP HANA Cloud, specifically its role in powering application development as an in-memory cloud database. As we do come to an end, Robin and Daniel, maybe you can let us know where to find the latest updates and projects from Bloor Research, or if there's anything you'd like our listeners to know or look out for.
Easiest way to get access to all of our research is through our website, bloorresearch.com. We also have regular posts on LinkedIn and other social media, so you can find us there too.
Perfect. All right. For our listeners, don't forget to check out the notes for today's episode for more information about Bloor Research and their work with SAP, and to further explore the capabilities of SAP HANA Cloud and how you can get involved in the SAP developer community. On behalf of SAP, we wish you well and hope you tune in next time for the next episode of the SAP Let's Talk Data podcast.
We hope you enjoyed the podcast. Please check out the show notes for additional links to information. Please subscribe or follow to join us on the next episode of Let's Talk Data, presented by SAP.